God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. So this is the beloved Serenity prayer of the 12-step fellowships everywhere. It's been a mainstay since their beginning. These 28 words have made their way onto decorative wall hangings and have been corporately recited after every recovery meeting I've ever been to. They have come to have significant meaning in my life. However, perhaps to the uninitiated, their true purpose may still be somewhat of a mystery. So how does this single sentence move from mere platitude to a supplication of substance? How does it relate to life and recovery? Welcome to episode 12 of Two Drunks to the Mic, the podcast where we share our past so that others might have a future. You can find our podcast anywhere that quality podcasts are found. Please subscribe, review, and as always, we ask you to share. So, Randy, as we've discussed before, just because we've entered a program of recovery, whether it's, in a 12-step fellowship or something else, it doesn't mean that our life is immune to difficulties. It's still full of things that need to be placed in their appropriate order of priority or classified as some type of responsibility. Are they in need of change? And can we find the courage to do so? Or, as is often the case, do we just have the wisdom to let sleeping dogs lie? What are you doing now to deal with all the problems that just happen to be attached with real life? What is your source of serenity?
So first off, Ian, as a 44-year-old man, an addict, a father, a husband, I will have to tell you that in order for me to cope with life in general, I have to have a spiritual life. And, as we see it, Ian, being a father, you see it, there's a lot of fear that's very hard to stay serene because of everything in this world, which we are not supposed to really look at, Ian, as an addict. It's almost like we need to be looking more towards the unknown, because the world has it backwards. From what they teach us that peace is a result of having enough money, possessions. That's not peace, So for me, Ian, and I'm glad that you're asking or talking about this, because I have had some struggles in the last month, with family, my wife. So there's definitely some things that are really rocking my world right now. And just not picking up sometimes is the only option. But, we've been sober for a while, and these kind of things creep up in everybody's life. But for an addict, it becomes heavy. It's very heavy. So, for me, Ian, I have to, I've said this before, I have to keep my head in the scripture first thing. I have to seek the peace of God. He tells me, be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. So for me, Ian, that's my only option right there. That's the only way I can cope. So I have to take a step back. If I'm full of fear and anxiety, Ian, there's something I'm not doing right. I'm not staying in the present. So, fear is it's something that arises out of me. My thoughts. What's going on up there? Inside this head of ours. And that's not a good place to go. So if I'm full of fear, we need to take a step back. And a lot of times, Ian, having fellowship, friends, people you can talk to, helps with all this stuff. If you're trying to do this on your own and you're not getting honest and talking to people, you're going to run into some trouble. So I hope that kind of answers your question about everyday life as an addict.
So let me ask you this. From the time that you first went into a 12-step fellowship meeting back, maybe when you were early in recovery, maybe it was one of the times you'd tried before to stop and you were kind of bouncing in and out of some rooms. I know for an absolute fact that you heard the Serenity prayer because it's recited after every single meeting that I've ever been to. And I just assume it's probably one of those kind of unwritten traditions that it just happens. Did it mean anything to you in those early days, or was it just all kind of weird because being where you were was weird? Just coming off the street, coming out of some really kind of bizarre situations, smoking crack out of car antennas and stuff like that. You're from a different world at that point. Mentally, spiritually, physically, you're probably not feeling too good. And here you go, you find yourself amongst a group of people. I don't know how many would be there. And they all stand up at the end and say that what we started with, the Serenity prayer. What did you think of that? What was your first impression of it?
Well, I can tell you that I was uncomfortable. But at that point, when we did the Serenity prayer, that was my only time where I guess that I felt I trusted that. I didn't so much trust the people when I walked in. They're all smiling, wanting to shake my hand. I don't trust that. My first instinct is, whoa, what's on the agenda here? But that prayer, Ian, is what I trusted in the beginning. And, at that point, I really wanted this thing called sobriety a lot, man, because I knew I wasn't going to make it. I had no life. So I guess looking back, that Serenity prayer, I had no problem with that.
So I guess what I'm hearing you say, Randy, is that your whole take on it was that the people are kind of weird. Maybe you didn't trust them for whatever reason, and that's totally understandable. A lot of us by nature kind of probably antisocial as addicts, and that kind of pushes us into, like you mentioned before, we want to be it with ourselves. It's kind of a weird thing. We want to be, but then we find that we really don't want to be. Yeah, it's kind of one of those weird paradox things I think that happens with an addict, is that we want something so bad. At least I did in my experience. I crafted a whole lifestyle around things, but at the end, I wanted everything I pushed away back. But you held on to that simple sentence. Was it the fact that God was mentioned in it, that you could place your trust in something outside of where you were standing physically, and you held on to the idea of God? You held on to the idea of the spiritual aspect of it?
Yeah. In the beginning, I was sick of being sick and tired. I was at that point, I was willing to do anything. And if I had, whatever was suggested to me at that point, early in sobriety, I guess it was a fear thing, man, Ian. I was very scared because what was happening to me out there, I had a lot of close calls, man. And we all know we don't get many of those. And so going back into the rooms, you talked about going back out for 8 months, Ian, or 10 months or whatever. That's about what it was for me. I could really relate with that because I ended up going back out and it nailed me with a vengeance. I mean, I came back 8-10 months later, a whole different person, worse off. And,
right. Yeah.
So, and like I said before on the other podcast, the other episodes, that, I was praying while I was out there. That's how scared I was that I wasn't going to make it back. And so there was really no, when I came in, that's, yeah, I hung on to that. God, I offer myself to thee. That's like, I'm ready, man. I surrender. I'm done. I'm
Right.
ready.
Right.
And so, yeah, that part, and you know how it is. 3-4 months later, you're clean for a while, and all of a sudden you're starting to, your mind's starting to play with you. But
Right. You're starting to feel better. You're starting to figure, oh man, I got this figured out. And I know during our conversation with Luke in the last episode, that was something we hit on. I'm not sure if that happened after Skype dropped you or not, but yeah, it was just, we were talking about that. We were talking about that idea of, we got it figured out. I can do it this time, and just go run. And then we come back all, in really rough shape. Now, in my case, it sounded like in Luke's case, he was in and out of rooms, in and out of programs, in and out of jails, and all of that stuff. For me, I kind of did the self quit. I'd run for a month and then just be really sick, and then come back and say, man, I quit. Last anywhere from 2-3 days to maybe 2 weeks, and then my resolve would just vanish because I was trying to do it on my own. And the next thing I know, I'm like, hey man, I feel pretty good. I think in the time that I stopped, I think I'd convinced myself that I had actually thought about how I could control it.
Yeah,
it tricked myself into, man, this time I really got it, and jump out there.
So yeah, you felt so good about yourself, like you were doing it,
exactly.
Like and as soon as you get that sense of pride or whatever, that you're doing it our accomplishment, right away, Satan, that's when he enters and lets you know. Right. That's kind of the experience I've had trying to quit on my own.
Well, sure.
I had a couple weeks, and then boom, I just had that thought like, oh my God, I'm able to do this. And then like 1 minute, the next day I'm back out,
Right. And it's kind of one of those things for me where, I guess that's what I was getting at when I was asking, about the first time you heard that. You'd been running on self for so long, and then all of a sudden this idea of God at the meeting that you were at was introduced. And for a lot of people, that's kind of a weird thing. They're rebelling, against the idea of any type of God, for whatever reason. That's just the way they believe. But for me, I think it was a matter of pride. I had a lot of pride in myself, and I've always believed in God. So to hear God come up in something like the Serenity prayer or the St. Francis prayer, and these types of, in other literature as well, I like that idea, but it did take me a while to get. I was so stuck in myself, man. It took me a while to actually surrender fully over to God. I wanted to live. I wanted to get sober. I knew that. So I gave just little pieces of it over to God, enough. And it wasn't until quite a bit later, when I was actually doing some step work and doing some other things, that the full impact of how God needed to be in my life hit me. And that means just a complete removal of myself. I must decrease so he can increase, type of thing. That was a huge struggle for me. And
did that happen about, how long were you sober when you really started to?
Probably right around 90 days.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that is I was coming off of some pretty heavy meds, the opiates and things like that. And I was really drinking hard at the end, really, really hard. It really messed me up. And I still, I had somebody asked a question the other day if you ever get like lapses in memory or lapses in like blank, you just go blank. Yeah. That happens to me. Like I'll be in a conversation with Julie, and I'll just be blah, 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 rambling on, and all of a sudden I'll stop and I'll be like, I have no idea. I can't even think of the word now.
And she's looking at you like, what's like, do you know that you don't even catch on to it? Like, she's got to remind you, like, well, what's the end of it?
Yeah.
And you're like, what? Yeah,
I get that a lot. And
yeah, what is that?
Man, probably just some kind of brain damage or something, man. I mean, I drank a lot, dude. I don't know, man. I don't know how that all works, but it's weird. But I know you asked me before if I had any kind of effects from long-term drinking. Physically, no, but that happens to me a lot, where I'll be sitting there talking, like I said, and just blank. But,
so when you were like 60 days sober, 75 or whatever, you started feeling like you wanted to take some credit for this. So you right
up to that point, I think that I was, but okay. I think it was after that when I realized that people that were around me in the program had been there 6, 7, 8 months. They were doing it a little differently. They'd actually had quit taking credit for what they were doing and were giving credit to God. That's when I did that, that was kind of a missing piece for me, because for so long we rely on ourselves. And I want to tie this, what I'm going to say here, into this serenity prayer that we're talking about and what it means to me. The serenity prayer for me is simply asking God for the wisdom to know what I can and can't take care of on my own. Or should I even deal with it? Should I just leave it alone? Because for so many years, man, every little cotton picking thing that ever came up, I had to take head on. I had to deal with it. And my way of dealing with things was generally to get drunk, to drink. These things still come up in my life. Mm-hmm. We still have finances. We still have marriages. We still have children. And children are new to me in this chapter of my life. So that's another stressor type of thing. But what I look at the way that I deal with things, say like financial issues. Am I dealing with them responsibly? Is there something that am I paying my bills? Am I doing what I'm supposed to do? And as long as I'm doing that, I'm good, man. But if I know in the back of my mind, hey, I could be doing something more, I could be doing something a little bit differently, that I get guilty. Mm-hmm. I start feeling like, man, I could be doing more. I do that with my service work too,
Yeah, I start to feel that way too, Ian. I feel that, no wonder we get ourselves in a bunch, sometimes, because we're not doing enough service. We're not getting out of ourselves enough. You know what I'm saying? We shouldn't even be wrapped up in thinking about ourselves really at all.
But it creeps, But the point of it is, though, Randy, is it's still there. We don't need to be ignoring ourselves or ignoring what we have going on, because that's just going to compound issues down the road too.
Well, yeah, I mean, we have a family, Ian. We definitely have to look. That's my main focus.
Yeah,
right. You know what I mean? I can't just split for all day long and feed the homeless whenever I want. I got other priorities, but I'm better off, just way better off, and doing service and being for others. That's how I can survive. But
right, and we all are, and that to me is one of the great things about 12-step fellowships is it's service oriented. It's like we mentioned before, when you show up and somebody asks you to set up chairs, or somebody asks you to make coffee, or somebody's asking you to bring cookies or whatever it is, hopefully they're not just doing it to be jerks. Hopefully they know that the objective to this is to teach you a little bit of humility. Get yourself out there, start setting up chairs, It's like Gary talked about in one of those episodes about him mopping floors and the guy coming up and saying, "Hey, that's not done right. Do it again." And Gary's like, "I know it's done right. I know it is." But it clicked for him at that point. He goes, "This guy's just trying to teach me something here." So he did it, and he redid the floor. And I was in that program with Gary. I had that happen to me a lot of times by that same counselor. And
really? Yeah, I don't know Gary, but I know you pretty well, Ian. How did you handle that?
I did
it click for you like that?
Yeah, I did it, man, because I wanted to be there. You know, I at that point I had understood that what I had as a personal agenda up until that point wasn't working for me. So for me, that serenity prayer, if we say it in a meaningful type of way, in my opinion anyway, there's a lot of power in that.
You're right.
Because you really are giving. You're really giving. You're really giving. Hopefully you're really just giving it all over to God. It doesn't, a lot of times, like Gary even mentioned again in that other episode, when he talks to people now and he tells them, to pray, they don't really know how, some of these people, and they're thinking that it has to be the way that you hear, I don't know, the Pope or somebody, preaching and or praying and all of this. And he simply tells them, no, man, you just need to start having a conversation with God and start there. And that's, you're talking 28 words, man, in the one sentence. And it's that simple, but it's one of those things that it's not a selfish thing. It's very other oriented, because if I'm in a mindset where I'm forgetting what I have control over, or I'm trying to control things that I shouldn't be, I'm in a very selfish place at that point. But if I'm earnest and I'm saying, man, God, just help me figure this out.
Well, we need reminders, Ian. We need to be, you know how Luke said in the last episode, God works through people.
Right.
And so we need to be surrounded by people like ourselves, a lot of the times.
And on the flip side of that, too, Randy, we also need to be the type of person that God can use. Well, I think one of the big things, and I see this a lot, not just in recovery. As a matter of fact, I probably see it less in recovery than I do in other places. But it's this reliance on self. People are so quick to pat themselves on the back for their accomplishments. I did this, I did that. To me, that's a very unhealthy attitude. Would be a very unhealthy attitude for me to have, because I'm forgetting what truly got me to where I am. And I'm going back to what got me there to begin with.
Yeah.
And so you couldn't beat it by yourself to begin with. So why would you try it again?
Yeah, a good point. Very good point.
You know what I mean? So that's why I like things like the Serenity prayer that can help me really think about what I'm asking. Do I really have a grasp on what's happening in my life? The reasons things are happening, those types of things. It forces me to go back and take an inventory of what's going on in my life, what should be a priority in my life, and what I just need to leave alone.
Yeah.
But we talk about this freedom in recovery, because there is a freedom. I think there might be a general misconception, though, sometimes when people hear freedom, like, oh, you mean I can go and do what I want to do when I want to do it, type of thing. And that's not the type of freedom we're thinking about at all, or speaking about. To me, that freedom is, there's a freedom in being able to be disrespected and walking away. There's a lot. That's the type of thing. And so you can take these things that pop up in your life and have the freedom to deal with them the way they need to be dealt so they don't come back to bite you. Mm-hmm. That's how these people rebuild their lives, is they start handling their responsibilities, and that's what I had to do. A couple of years ago, I know you know this because I've told you, but we were getting really close to losing the house that we were renting. We weren't making our bills. We had less bills then, but we were really, really, really struggling. And that would have been a perfect opportunity for me, if I had been still attached to my old way of thinking, of just going and climbing in a bottle and going away. That'd have been a prime opportunity to do that. But I didn't, because I thank God that I've been, relearned or taught, or just, I guess it's just a different perspective is what it comes down to.
Did you get a sense of peace?
Yeah, I did. I mean, there was some anxiety, but you know what? We prayed on that, and that went away. And the rest of the story. Julie ended up getting a really good job. I ended up getting a job, and now here we are. We bought a house, and we've done some other things. We've got 2 little babies and things like that. All of it's kind of tied together. But I think back, if I would have reacted differently, if I would have reacted how I historically reacted in situations like that, I'd have been out the door. And I thank God that, through whatever point in this process that I went through in my recovery, whether it was through step work, whether it was through my service work at my church, or service work in these meetings, whatever it was, it clicked then. And I stood by where I needed to stand by. And, so I guess all that to say is, bad times come up. We just need to stick by what has gotten us to this good place that we're in, and stick by it. Mm. Be as loyal to it as it is to us. And by it, I will say, it's been, for me, it's been God the entire time. And I would say that for anybody, it really is God, because God does that type of thing, does that work.
Yeah. You have to ask yourself, okay, are you really trusting God when you're getting all bent out of shape and worried? Well, where's your trust at?
Right.
Where's that at? So we got to get back into that. You got to stay in that, man. And, Ian, I've been through some booms and busts, and the one out in Vegas, man, I never forget that the piece that I got out of when it busted, I wasn't living like way above my means. So when the recession hit, man, and it hit with the vengeance out there in Vegas, man, because they weren't used to that, dude. People in Vegas always walked around with a pocket full of money, and they've always been booming and this, that, and the other. And I felt a sense of peace when it all, because it wasn't out of my doing. Years ago I would lose a job, because I came in, I was still drunk when I came in to work. There were a couple instances that I've gotten fired because of my drinking and drugging, and failing drug tests, and so a lot of those things occurred because of what I was doing. But this, for the first time in my life, I was living a spiritual life. Okay, and this thing that happens in everyday life happened, but hey, it wasn't my fault. So there's a peace in that. Okay. So if it's, then God's working in your life. Let him do his thing. As soon as we want to step in there and rearrange things is when we go south.
Right.
So, you know what I mean? So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great spot to end this on, is that thought right there. That ties it all back to this serenity prayer of just knowing, asking for that peace, asking for what can I change, and ultimately we need to trust in it. We need to trust in that once we put that out to God, whatever answer we get back, we need to trust in that and sit in that, because like you just said, that's where that peace is. Where on the flip side of that, if we revert back to our old self, our old way of thinking, it can go off the rails really quick.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm glad that you brought that up, man, because like I said, I've had a lot of struggles the last few weeks, man, and I got so many things on my plate, man. The businesses are looking like it's a good chance it's going to sell. So when it does, I'm out of here, man. So I'm gonna go back home and all that. And,
yeah,
so there's been a lot of things, man.
But I mean, I and the reason I wanted to bring it up, Randy, is because we have conversations with people and wherever they are in their recovery or however much time they have. And some of them newcomers, man, they get intimidated when, it's like, oh, how many years ago? I'll be 9 years pretty soon. Oh man, crap, And I think that there's almost this intimidation that comes along with people where they're looking at where they are, say they're at 30 days and they're thinking, man, I don't know if I can make it 9 years or a year or whatever. Yeah. And the point I'm trying to make in bringing this topic up and just giving examples of, dude, life goes on with all the problems and everything else that comes along with it, but you can make it through.
Yes. And when something comes up, Ian, that you're helping a friend of yours, they go through a very hard time, we need to love them, man. We need to talk to them, let them know everything's going to be okay, man. Everything's,
yeah, it's tough
for them. It is.
It's tough for them to understand.
That, yeah. You know what I'm saying? So everybody listening, man, for sure, man. It's get in prayer and turn our lives over and let things be, man.
And don't think that you have to have all the answers in order to engage with someone, because the person with a week of sobriety has more sobriety a person with 1 day. What got you to that week? Don't start interpreting, the way that you might feel about the literature out there just yet, because you might not have a grasp on it. I heard something really interesting recently where somebody came out and they were saying, man, when I first got into those rooms, I was really pushing some ideas that I found out were pushing people away. And the guy was kind of publicly throwing it out there. It was a really cool post to see, man, because he's still learning through the process, and like anything else on this podcast, these are just opinions, a lot of it, but they're also our experience.
Yeah.
And our experiences are the good times and the bad times. And we can't relate to everybody out there. We know that. But
right. Well, we're complex individuals here, and we just need to keep things simple. Okay. We will complicate everything. So let's just keep it simple.
I heard your dad said that you could complicate a black cup of coffee.
Yeah. Yes.
All right, Randy. Hey, listen, brother. Thank you for coming on again, man. And thanks for being part of this.